So basically last night at about 6:30, our CST team heads over to Deltona for arresting an arrest warrant for Noel Flores. Noel, on November 6th, had called and threatened to blow up the DeLand courthouse, and with the intent of killing Jews, blacks, and spics in his terminology. So not only was he charged with, was going to be arrested for a felony for blowing up a building, but also it was also a hate crime because of the racial epithets that he used. So they went there last night at 6:30, and as you can see in the video, they knock on the door, they hear some kind of a commotion in the house, and then you hear a gunshot, and you hear somebody scream. And even the deputies, as you see in the video, they're a little perplexed. What was that noise? Did you hear that noise? What was it? And then when they peer through the window, they can see what's going on, that somebody was shot. And then shortly after that, you hear a second shot. And the deputies drop back, they call for help, and they begin to evacuate the buildings. Noel Flores then calls 911, and you hear that call where him and the dispatcher have the conversation where he talks about he killed somebody in the house. First supervisor on the scene is Lieutenant Corey Pizer, and for about 30 minutes, she tries to talk with him. And he was very talkative for most of the night. After she talks to him, she tells him the sheriff is here. He said that he had met me in church, and he wished to speak to me. And for probably the next 20 or 25 minutes, I spoke to him. And then the negotiators got on scene, and the negotiators then spoke with him for hours after that. And then probably shortly after, we were there at least 6 hours before he broke off communication with us. He wouldn't respond with us. The decision was made to introduce tear gas into the house. Approximately 15 canisters were used. Still no response. We then sent our robot in, and the robot cleared about 85% of the apartment. We couldn't get under a bed, and we couldn't get into that closet in the bathroom. And then the SWAT team went in. When the SWAT team went in, they cleared the bed. They were in the bathroom. They pulled on the door, and they could feel resistance, and they realized that he was in there on the other side of the door. And when they got the door open, he was seated on the floor with the gun to his chest and fired one shot into his heart. And basically, probably 30 minutes later, he was pronounced dead in a hospital in Sanford. He had said during the course of the night that he killed his nephew, that this would probably kill his sister in New York because it was actually his great nephew who he lived with, Arthur, and he said he could never face her, knowing that he killed her grandson, and there was only one way out for him. His wife was dead, and he was going to shoot himself in the heart. And one of the questions that he asked all of us that spoke to him was, "Will you think anything less of me if I kill myself?" And of course, we told him no, and the objective was to put the gun down and come out safely. And the other thing he told us was that his nephew tried to attack him with a knife, and that the house was loaded with drugs, and he wanted us to know that the drugs weren't his. Well, we found no drugs in the house, and to be honest with you, it looks like he staged the scene. He shot his nephew twice in the torso, and from the footage that we witnessed from the robot, it almost looked like he put his knife in the knife in his nephew's hand, because that's all he kept saying was, "This was self-defense. This was self-defense." But the laws of gravity would defy you, if you had a knife in your hand, of falling, clenching the knife straight up, and just laying the way he was laying. So why he killed his nephew, we have no idea. This is clearly a murder-suicide. But that's the point he kept hammering over and over when he was talking to me, and I know when he was talking to Lieutenant Pizer, was that he wasn't a bad guy, that his nephew tried to stab him, and then that story changed to his nephew had a gun. He took the gun from the nephew, and then the nephew got a knife. But who knows? I mean, clearly he had a man who threatened to blow up the courthouse, wasn't hitting on all cylinders, and this is unfortunate that you have a young man who was killed by his great uncle who he was living with.